VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. I'm here with the other Dustin, that Vikings fan. How are you, sir? This is your third or fourth appearance on the show.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I think this is my third time on here. I can now say that I'm a friend of the show, and yeah, it's pretty awesome to be on here.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you coming. Again, where can we find you on Twitter and TikTok?
On Twitter, you can find me at Dustin underscore NFL, and then on TikTok, that Vikings fan.
Okay, perfect. Well, we brought you on here today. We're gonna kind of hit that slow part of the NFL calendar, if there is such a thing, especially around the 4th of July. That's when it's crickets. But we want to get out ahead of that and talk about three pertinent topics to Vikings football. And the first I want to ask you about that will seize the narrative by the throat until it's resolved is Danielle Hunter. So we were living a happy life about a week ago, and all of a sudden an Ian Rappaport tweet said that the Vikings were listening or teams were calling about the price of Danielle Hunter. It was later kind of revealed that that wasn't a Vikings driven dialogue. It was just the teams are calling to figure out how much is he going to cost. So I want to ask you, sir, that's out in the stratosphere. Is that a hint that Hunter could be traded, or is that just contract jostling to figure out how much this man should be paid?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. Obviously, teams are interested in a fully healthy Danielle Hunter. He played his first healthy season in the last 3 years, I think it was. Obviously, the first year with the neck injury. The year after that, it was the pectoral injury. So now he finally played a full season with us. Obviously, in the awful at Donatel's scheme. Quietly had about 10 and a half sacks.
Mm-hmm.
He was obviously a part of that god awful defense, but now that he's, 28, turning 29 in October, he's, pushing towards that 30-year-old mark. And I think that's what the team is, trying to stay away from in a way. But I do think that he's a solid veteran for this defense. He's still, a top three defensive piece on this defense. Harrison Smith, if you still want to count him as one of the best players. We got lot of really good young players. So I think that Danielle Hunter is still a good fit for this Vikings defense. Even the switch to the 3-4 instead of 4-3. Just yeah, I think teams are interested. They definitely are. I don't know if the Vikings do or do not want to move on from Danielle. He's kind of in that, between range of being a younger team, getting rid of old veterans. He's still good. So yeah, I think that he still has trade value. What he'll get traded for, if he does get traded, we'll see. But yeah, I think that's pretty much my stance on Danielle Hunter.
So you're right. First of all, I think the only thing that would keep the Vikings or that would make them think twice about extending Hunter is the age factor. No, he's not crazy old, but do you want to dish out 20 to 25 million to a guy that was injured for most of the 2020 and 21 seasons and then is going to be 29 around Halloween? So let me ask you, sir, for let's say 3 years, 66 million. Are you on board with that hypothetical Hunter contract?
Well, I was taking a look at some of like the top paid, edge rushers and stuff like that. I think I don't know if I was looking at total salary, but JJ or TJ Watt, he's
Mm-hmm.
making 28 million.
Mm-hmm.
Joey Bosa 27, Garrett 25. So do the Vikings think that Danielle Hunter is worth that much, or do they think that he's worth a little more than that? Not quite as much. I think I saw that he was making like 14 million,
Yeah.
so not even a little under half of what they're making. So Vikings fans, think that he should be paid a little more. I think he is definitely worth, at least a top 10 edge rusher money, top eight. I don't know if he's, one of the best, top three, but I definitely think that he should be paid a little higher than obviously what he is, because that's a bag of peanuts right now is what he's making.
Yeah, it is, especially because of the way that they've wiggled his deal around in the last. I swear to God, we talk about this every offseason. they wiggled it around. So now he only has $5.5 million new dollars going into his bank account. And I think he has new representation too. So they finally put their foot down and said, we're done with this malarkey of the Rick Spielman team friendly deal. We want to get ours. It sounds like you want him back. Is that correct?
I do want him back. I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So what is your, let's say that doesn't happen. What is your prediction for his spot? Is it a promotion of Patrick Jones, a promotion of DJ Wanham? They really like Andre Carter somehow, or do they sign Unique Ngakoue again, Robert Quinn, or do they get something back edge rusher wise in the trade with Hunter? What would be your prediction if they say, you know what, we're not going to do this Hunter thing?
I think that we have pretty good depth behind Danielle Hunter, but I also do think that they are more of a rotational depth. DJ Wanham, Patrick Jones. Obviously, Marcus Davenport's going to play opposite side of whoever else is playing, or however they want to use Marcus Davenport, maybe in coverage. Who knows? But no, I feel good about our depth anyway. If we were to move on from Danielle. It's yeah, I think that a free agent would help. Yannick Ngakoue again. I would totally be on board with that. Or just some other veteran defensive end. I know there's really not too much out there, but I think Yannick Ngakoue would be a perfect fit, especially in the 3-4 versus his first stint in the 4-3.
Yeah, I agree there. I think what this boils down to, in addition to the age thing, if you want to call it that for Hunter, when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah gives his value speech, which he does every couple months, is it smarter for the Vikings to pour $22 million per season into Hunter, or just go grab Ngakoue for $8 million? Is that the better value in a Brian Flores defense? And I think we'll see that play out in living color in terms of the decision making. But I will tell you this, and I think you'll agree, it will, in retrospect, be the weirdest thing ever if the Vikings ranked 30th in points allowed last year, and one of their solutions was to get rid of Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter. Like, how do you fix a defense by getting rid of your two Pro Bowl edge rushers?
Yeah, exactly. As they say, your edge rushers will create better coverage, hypothetically, for your back end defense, your corners, your safeties, whatnot. So I think, Zadarius Smith had a good first half of the season and then kind of said, see ya, I'm not really, whatever, with his injury, whatever. Danielle Hunter kind of was the opposite. He didn't start off very strong, kind of ended the season with a higher note. So I think it's a good, new look for this defense. See what we got.
Amen. All right. So we just wrapped up minicamp, mandatory minicamp, 2-day event. They didn't schedule 3 days. A lot of teams just cancel that anyway. And some of the biggest items that came out of that were this Hunter mess, if you want to call it that. He just didn't show up. He's a true blue holdout. On the other hand, Justin Jefferson reduced all mystery and said, I'm here. They didn't make me come to OTAs, so why would I show up? I'll be at training camp no matter what, extension or not. Jordan Addison was on the shelf. He still has something that we're told is minor. Jaquelin Roy got some run with the first team, which I did not see coming whatsoever. And then Josh Metellus seemed to be like a 2-day standout, getting a lot of action on defense. And then Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in a separate podcast called him the team's unsung hero. So out of those items or additional items that you might have, what was your sentiment about minicamp, and how does it make you feel going into this little 6-week break for the players?
Well, I think you forgot one of the greater storylines, and that's the rise of Jalen Naylor, or the perceiving rise of him. He's looked really good in camp. Obviously, none of us have been there, but just the highlights, just the talk of taking that next step. I'm rooting for Jalen Naylor big time. Not that I'm a Michigan fan or Michigan State fan or anything, but. It's good to see those younger wide receivers step up too, especially moving on from Adam Thielen. I'm just super excited for Jalen Naylor and excited for Jordan Addison once he's ready for minicamp in July. I think that's when KOC said that he would be ready. So I think we're all ready for this wide receiver corps to take a big step, especially with that departure of Adam Thielen.
What I really am intrigued by with Naylor, whether it is the flashiness at minicamp or the upcoming season, is no matter what KJ Osborne does, whether he keeps Addison at bay for WR2 for a while and has another Osborne season, which is 700, 800 yards, or even goes more than that, no matter what he does, I'm convinced he's going to a different team next year because they drafted Jordan Addison to be the WR2. So even if Osborne is a total baller, well, all he's doing is making his contract with his next team a lot bigger, which means if Naylor looks the part, he would be odds-on favorite to be the WR3 next year. So I like that you brought him up. He'll probably get traditional WR4 targets this year. He had some garbage time theatrics last year. I mean, not his fault. It was garbage time. He did the best that he could. But in addition to the Naylor excitement that we're generating right now, it's even more important for next year because I'm convinced that when the moment Addison was drafted by the Vikings, that was Osborne's last, it was the nudge that said, oh, all right, there's no way you're going to draft a dude in the first round and then just make him a WR3 unless he sucks. And we certainly don't hope that happens. One thing I don't think I've got your temperature on since we last talked is on Jiren Hall, the round 5 quarterback, 25 years old. In your brain, do you perceive him as a guy who could take over for Kirk if they move on because Kirk is in a contract year, or do you consider him just a round 5 developmental lottery ticket that may not even be on the team in 3 years?
So as of right now, I think that it is that second part that you were saying is, he's just a 5th round pick. It's just developmental right now. But I think he has the attributes to be, a good quarterback. All we're hoping for is serviceable at best, like a backup, Nick Mullins or whatnot. Hopefully he can be something more than that. Vikings fans are looking for that quarterback life after Cousins, and I think Jiren Hall definitely has, what it would take. We got to see him in preseason first, see him in a live game. Practice is all we can see right now, and it only tells us so much. Without pass rush, everybody can make a play in practice. So no, I think that he can be a good player, in years time. Right now, practice squad QB3. So
yeah, that's where I'm at too. And I really like when the right after the draft, he had his little interviews that you could watch on Vikings YouTube, and he really sounds mature, probably because he's 25 years old. And then if you watch his tape at BYU, which is kind of like a skeleton offense, Zach Wilson could tell you all about it, where you're supposed to thrive. He really does look like a diet Kyler Murray, the way that he moves, the way that he throws it. He just doesn't do everything quite as well as the good version of Kyler Murray does. So yeah, I'm fascinated by it because the way that the Vikings are setting this up with Cousins in his contract year is, let's say the Vikings go 10-7, lose in the first round or lose in the second round embarrassingly. That probably is the end of the Cousins era. And then what? And then it's either Jiren Hall or drafting the next guy. And if they're going to trust the enterprise to the next guy, that must mean they have a plan to get into the top 12 or top 10 of next year's draft, because otherwise they would have drafted some dude this year like Will Levis to groom behind Cousins. And they had the golden opportunity to do that. But they didn't. All right, the last thing I want to ask you about just doesn't go away. So a year ago, when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah took the big job, he point blank, he's done this a couple times, told reporters that with team building, he doesn't look at the NFL in a binary way. He doesn't think you have to tank to get a better draft pick, nor do you have to trade all of your draft capital like the 2021 Rams to make a push at the Super Bowl. He said that he, quote, navigates both worlds, a competitive rebuild. Still, every single day on the internet, it's some NFL pundit expert that I generally trust says that the Vikings have an identity crisis. Nobody knows what they're doing. And that leaves fans, Vikings fans in particular, to debate whether or not they're rebuilding or contending. So do you have more insights to offer on this? Because I'm convinced that you listen to Kwesi's words, who says, I'm not doing either one. I'm doing both because that's my philosophy. What can you say about this undying, relentless contender versus rebuild debate?
In a way, I do like what Kwesi is doing. You don't have to go full Rams. You don't have to trade, the whole farm to make the Super Bowl. I personally think that's not a smart way of doing things. You look at the Rams, they haven't had a first round pick in, it feels like forever.
2016.
Yeah, since 2016. That's crazy to me. Like that's I don't know. You can't do that. But tanking, I also don't believe in that because why would you purposely want to be bad for a draft pick? Yeah, there's some generational quarterbacks, players, whatnot that you would like to have on your team, but just me personally, I don't like the idea of tanking or going, trading the farm for picks, players, whatnot. So I think that it's good for Kwesi to dabble in a little bit of both. I like the aggressive trades that he's doing, with TJ Hawkinson last year. That threw everybody off guard. We thought we'd get, a lower tier tight end, but here we got a top 5, top 10 tight end. But Kwesi's direction that he wants to go younger. Contracts, he wants to extend contracts on the younger guys, not necessarily the older guys, but just contract negotiations, stuff like that, letting go of veterans, leaders, captains, Kendricks, Thielen, all those captains, leaders. It's also good for the younger guys to step up and make themselves leaders as well, and make themselves captains. But long story short, I do think that it's good for Kwesi to dabble in a little bit of both, not have a complete rebuild, not be, the Rams either. So
let me ask you this. Is it your perception that the Vikings are in it to win it this year?
This year, I don't think they are, full Super Bowl mode, only because, we're letting go of so many players. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be, god awful. We're not going to just win 6 games. We're still going to be competitive. But I think until we make more roster moves, maybe it's kind of making the playoffs, just borderline. See how far you can get, kind of like last year was, not running it back, but just kind of seeing how far you can go in the playoffs.
And then let's see. So we are in June. You still got to see training camp preseason. What would you attach for a win-loss prediction right now, which you can certainly change when we do this in August?
I have a lot of people when I go live on TikTok ask me this all the time.
Oh, really? All right.
I say,
I'm predictable.
Yeah. I see like 9 to 11 wins. Still making the playoffs. Still a divisional winner. So yeah, it's 9, 10, 11 wins.
So if you marry that prediction, which sounds like a playoff team, but you're not sold on them being a Super Bowl contender, do you see that perhaps at the trade deadline, if they're 7-2 or some shit like that, that they would say, God, we are good. We are gonna try to go our version of all in. Is that kind of how you have it pegged? Because if you don't have them pegged as Super Bowl contender, but they could still go 11-6, it's like there should be some wiggle room there. That are they just going to kind of wait and see?
Yeah, I think it's a wait and see type deal. Once that trade deadline comes around, if their defense, looks promising, I think that they could add a defensive piece. Offense, I think, is still gonna, they're gonna build on from last year. Obviously, there's still room for improvement. Although they've had, one of the better offenses in the league last year. But yeah, I think if anything, they would add a defensive player to that trade deadline. But if they are 7-2 and they're looking good, it's that might change a lot of perspectives. Still, I don't know if they're still Super Bowl bound. I don't know if they're one of the top 5 to 8 contenders for the Super Bowl. In the playoffs. Taking down the Eagles, I think would be the first order of business. I think then after that, the NFC is pretty wide open. So.
Yeah, that's what you got to ask yourself as a Vikings fan in this stupid debate about rebuild or contend is if they somehow beat the Eagles week 2 and they look as if they're in the same ballpark as the 49ers, that's all that really matters because those are who knows if any of those teams can beat the Chiefs when you get to the Super Bowl or the Bengals if they turn out to be good again. But the NFC, because Rodgers is gone, and a lot of these dudes over the last years, like the good version of Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, all those guys have either retired or gone to the AFC. So I think that to size up the Vikings' reasonable Super Bowl hopes early in September and October is to see, how do they look compared to the NFC? All right, the last thing, I'll put you on the spot. Going into training camp and preseason, aside from Jalen Naylor, who's somebody you're eyeing as a breakout player that, is like somewhat under the radar right now?
I think someone that has not been talked about that I have heard is one of our rookies, Jay Ward. I think
Hmm.
that he can in this defense be used pretty well. Although he was, a mid to late round pick, I don't think that he's going to be used right away, but he can be, maybe not as good as Honey Badger was, but play the roles, be a hybrid linebacker, a safety, a corner,
Hmm.
whatever the team needs him to be. I think that he can excel at it and be pretty good. Yeah, once they put on the pads and everything, I think he's going to really show out his skill set and how value, each position can be. I know, I forgot who was saying it, but they're going to use him primarily in just one spot, whether that's safety or corner. But I think that he can be used pretty versatile, like he was in LSU.
I like that one because it's under the radar. He has the draft profile for it, and he has that versatility that you mentioned. Because right now, after Byron Murphy, we have this big fat ass mystery about who's going to be good as a cornerback, and he's just another option if he can play the slot. All right, sir, let's do this again right before training camp starts to kick up and we can digest any type of free agent moves. The Vikings actually have cap space. Usually right now we're like, oh God, where can we get to find money? So they could indeed sign some free agents and we can perhaps talk about those, talk about the Hunter resolution. But sir, I appreciate you coming on. Any closing thoughts?
Nothing right now. Nothing right now. I can't wait till training camp starts, and we'll go from there. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. We're about 6 weeks away and we'll talk to you then. Okay, sir?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, take it easy.